Hello, everybody. It's Walter, your favorite historian, educator, professor, and social studies extraordinaire, here today to discuss one of my literary works in progress with you. It is entitled, What If General George C. McClellan Had Defeated President Abraham Lincoln in the 1864 presidential election? Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the subject at all, the 1864 presidential election was the 20th presidential election in American history, taking place on November the 8th, 1864, during the American Civil War. This election demonstrated, ladies and gentlemen, that no matter what is going on in this country, not even a great civil war, will a presidential election not happen. All right, I don't care what is going on in the background. The United States is going to have its presidential election every 4 years. Civil war be damned, okay? And that indeed was our case here. The election featured two contenders, incumbent Republican President Abraham Lincoln versus Democratic challenger General George C. McClellan, who officially was a subordinate to Abraham Lincoln, being a general in the United States Army, okay? And it was a very, very, very paid attention to election, ladies and gentlemen, because let's face it, a lot of people argue that this election may well determine the fate of the American Civil War. I personally don't agree with that, but more on that in a second. In this election, okay, Abraham Lincoln, of course, as many of you probably already know, Lincoln did not think he was going to win re-election. As a matter of fact, he thought he was going to lose pretty badly. All right, turned out the opposite happened. All right, but the election was not a foregone conclusion. Okay, but for some very fortunate battlefield successes, especially by General William Tecumseh Sherman in the Deep South, very close to the election, ladies and gentlemen, Lincoln may well have lost this election. And even though he ultimately prevailed, it was a very close contest in several states, including, but not limited to, New York, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Maryland, Connecticut, Oregon, and several other states as well, where Lincoln received less than 53% of the popular vote. Okay? As a matter of fact, I go back to New York, where Lincoln won the state only by 6,749 votes. That's very close. The total 50.46 versus 49.54%. Lincoln barely won New York, all right, by the skin of his teeth, ladies and gentlemen. So this election was not a foregone conclusion. And if a few thousand people had voted the other way, like I said, in New York, Oregon, Connecticut, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Maryland, all right, and you throw in a couple of other states, let's say for the sake of argument, Ohio and Lincoln's own Illinois, McClellan would have won the election, or it would have certainly been much closer. For the record, McClellan won 3 states, Kentucky, Delaware, and New Jersey. All right, and he won all 3 by commanding majorities. So there were a lot of people who voted for McClellan in this election, ladies and gentlemen. The popular vote for Lincoln was 2,218,388 votes. The popular vote for McClellan was 1,812,807 votes. Okay, the Electoral College was 212 for Lincoln and 21 for McClellan. All right, and my shall we say alternative history, or more so journal analysis here, first the journal analysis, then the alternative history, would demonstrate what America would have been like under a President George McClellan. Okay, and lots of people argue, again, as I said before, that a McClellan victory in 1864 may well have changed the whole dynamic of the Civil War. I myself do not agree with that. To put it in baseball terms, by the time McClellan was elected in November 64, the war was in the middle of the 9th inning. All right, so wasn't too much fight left in the Confederacy. All right, and McClellan wouldn't have been sworn in until March 4th, 1865. December, January, February, March 4 months later. Okay, so by the time that happened, the Confederacy would have been even further pushed against the wall. As you already know, by that point, they were already next to destitute on men, on resources, and on morale. All right, the Confederacy was done. By this point, you know, the Union was putting the final touches on their victory. So I don't feel that a McClellan victory would have done much to change the outcome of the war or the ultimate conclusion date on April the 9th, 1865, which would have been a month after McClellan was sworn in as the 17th President of the United States. Where I will greatly expound in this writing, more than anything, in these writings, would be on how the peace may have been different under a President McClellan, how Reconstruction may have been different versus how it was under President Andrew Johnson, who of course became president upon Lincoln's assassination in April 1865. How you would have seen a President McClellan handle the radical Republicans in Congress as a Democratic president. Okay, for the record, ladies and gentlemen, the Democratic Party in that era was the complete opposite of the Democratic Party today. The Democratic Party in that era was the small government states' rights party that emphatically believed in white supremacy and was almost unanimously opposed to civil rights and equal protection of the laws for African Americans, Native Americans, and anyone who was non-white. They certainly also were not in favor of enfranchising women by the same token either. The Republican Party in that era was the opposite. The Republican Party believed in liberty and freedom and equality and civil rights for African Americans, for Native Americans, for women, for Asians, so forth and so on. All right, and the parties essentially have completely switched ideologies from what they were in this time period. Okay, the Republicans of that era are the Democrats today. The Democrats of that era are the Republicans today. All right, not to get too far off subject, we would, in my opinion, certainly see some conflict between a Democratic President George McClellan and a radical Republican Congress, which of course was beginning to solidify its power in 1865 and even further enhanced its power after the congressional elections of 1866. Definitely touched on is how I believe McClellan's political savvy here would have certainly led him to be more willing to work with the radical Republicans in Congress than was President Andrew Johnson. And I firmly believe that he also would have been savvy enough to avoid impeachment, as Andrew Johnson certainly was not able to do that. All right. So I think once I finish this and make this available for your review, I'd think you will certainly at the very least find it interesting. And if you disagree with my perspectives on it, I would love to hear them. All right. Or what you would think about this subject in general had Democratic challenger George C. McClellan defeated Republican President Abraham Lincoln in the 1864 presidential election. All right. So, again, thanks for listening. If you have any questions or commentaries, leave them down below, and I'll be happy to answer them. I appreciate all of you. I definitely, feel very fulfilled when you all tell me that you learn from my videos. As a professor, that touches my heart beyond words. So I encourage you to keep listening, keep learning, and never stop asking questions. Take care of yourself, stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you at the next video. Professor Shelton, out.